honorable sisters, brothers, and friends. This is a just informal, unrehearsed, although this is the second time I've started to video this particular video on this particular subject. Because I want to do it within 15 minutes to make sure it's not deleted and concise and get more to the point. I have been accused of saying that, of being where I think I know more about anything, anytime than anybody. No, I only know what I know, and that's maybe 90% from what has been reported, that I accept those that I think are true facts, and then I say what the true facts are, and I may add my comment, my interpretation, my analysis, and my comment. Well, through the years, it's obvious that Hoover was a queer, as I would call him then. I now say it's J. Edgar Homo Hoover, the criminally insane murderer, assassin. He set up JFK. And I have videos, you can research them, of exposing J. Edgar Homo Hoover crimes, violations of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, especially with Robert Kennedy, who had 10 children, and his wife was pregnant. And I was there at the presidential suite, the Ambassador Hotel, and the main reason I was there is because I suspected that criminally insane Homo Hoover would not let him be president and would have to assassinate him to keep him from being president, and might do it that night. And from what I could analyze, I thought he might try that night. But Bobby ignored me. They got to him like they got to Einstein. But Einstein, of course, through mathematical physics, says this man is correct. He is cordially, politely, professionally suggesting to modernize that they say it's my transformation equation. And he would interrupt me and say it's Lorenz's. Well, of course, I would say, out of politeness, the Lorentz-Einstein transformation equation. Then he would interrupt me and say, no, it's Lorenz's transformation equation. Do you understand? He took his name off of what they would call the Einstein transformation equation, which was the Lorentz-Einstein transformation equation, which was x prime equals x minus vt to the square root of 1 minus v squared over c squared. C is the little c, the velocity of light. And I insisted that, and theoretically at least, I've broken the light barrier, BLB. This is how. Well, I explained through theoretical experiment, which he used, and in that my rho prime equals m prime v prime r would equal, when it equals, and it was at that time, in my opinion, but not publicized, his rho equals mvr, set r to unity, as my m prime goes towards an infinitesimal particle, my v prime has to be greater than his little c, velocity of light. And that I have capital X prime equals capital X minus Vt over the square root of 1 minus V squared over capital C squared, where capital C is equal to or greater than the velocity of light. And he agreed. He says, we're going to work together. He says, but they tell me not to work with you. And I said, well, I don't think that's right. I have a suggestion with my bold concepts and your ability in mathematical physics. I think we could maybe put together a unified field theory that would be valid. And he says, you're right. He said it very angrily. So he was going up against Hoover. Well, on the day we were supposed to start working, his living secretary, who would take down the notes, and I can prove everything I said, she would take, it was a three-way conversation, and she would take the notes and then talk to him in German, and then he would talk to me in English. And I like to say, to repeat this joke, he would say, well, do you know any German? The only German I know at the moment is my college days, Weinstreich, Weissbier, who's going to buy the beer? And he laughed. Well, I said, well, I prepared, we can have our progress and from our previous conference. And she says, well, he's dead. Dead? He had no complaints. She says, he dropped dead last night. She was profusely crying. Now, I'll get to that topic of conversation in a moment, because this is important to understand who Hoover was. A top attorney said, I listen to you, I know you're telling the truth. Yeah, this is Hoover's hometown, he has control, power. But I know some things in what you tell me, and as the plaintiff, we're going to go after him legally. That was on a Monday. On a Wednesday, I called to make sure he was okay, and he would be there Friday, because Hoover's mover ever faster and more vicious. He's not going to let Kennedy replace him, fire him, or even replace him when he's elected in, 1964. That's what the Kennedy brothers decided when I was complaining to Robert in the Attorney General's office, ever more forceful with a louder voice. Now, he took, and his brother, he says, I'm his brother. I says, how could he be dead? He says, I don't know. He said, I talked to him Monday, he was in good health and good spirits. He had no complaints. He said, I talked to him yesterday. He seemed in good health. He had no complaints. He says, but they told me to rush back because he dropped dead last night. He says, in fact, they tell me to rush and they're going to bury him Friday. You have to understand that Hoover was a fiend. He not only was a murderer, he was criminally insane at times. But he had so much power, he could walk around with his PR specialist of what a fine fellow he was, while he actually saw psychiatrists and psychologists because of he was a queer, and that's why I was forced to call him Homo Hoover. And so, and he has them in his way of operating, where they can hit you. There's only 24 hours in a day, and if they just subtract from the time you have to devote for what you want to do and should be doing, that minimizes. And then you have to overcome obstacles. So at best, you look like maybe you're zigzag through various obstacles that to the average public say, well, you know, that's one of those scientists, you know, they're all scientists, you know, these thinkers. But how is the thinking, what type of a person is a psychologist or psychiatrist that purposely violates the Constitution for that Homo Hoover who he has to analyze and knows he's a Homo Hoover, he's a pedophiliac, do you understand? When he had parties, he was a woman hater, he had parties with young boys. So he was a pedophiliac, actually. This psychologist, psychiatrist that knows him and has to try to help him and works in his operations of violating constitutional rights, the rights of the Constitution, Bill of Rights. What I did scientifically, my inventions, science achievements are mine by the Constitution, Bill of Rights. But I don't own anything. I'm financially embarrassed. What kind of mentality are these fellas that purposely violate to placate that Homo Hoover? And they're still there. They're the worst because they present to the politicians that were appointed, the rector and those who, a lot of them earned it through the ranks, They should pick the director from civil service exams from within the department, not some political plum backroom hatchet man for a politician that says, yeah, I'll have him. He will protect what I want to do and everything secretly. That was how Slick Willie Webster got in there. And who's Slick Willie Webster? He was the one that worked with the British intelligence to falsify the reports so we could go to war against Iraq. And then it came out that it was false reports. Everything I say is absolutely true and has been proven through time, and I prove anything and everything I ever present. Now, I am probably not a number one expose of Einstein. I defended him, colleague, personal friend, but when I found out he stole E equals mv squared, that's what Olinto de Preto, capital D-E, capital P-R-E-T-T-O, capital D-E, capital P-R-E-T-T-O, de Preto. He put forth E equals mv squared, saying a small amount of matter becomes an enormous amount of energy, work it out mathematically, into tons of energy of coal. And he was related to Michael Basso, who helped Einstein get the work there at the patent office. So they were all related and had a little foursome group of talking, discussing future mathematical physics of the work of Olinto de Preto. Absolute true facts. Now, what kind of operatives then are there that secretly violate the Constitution and have this Hoover that I talked to senators who they would get white and tremble about getting Hoover investigated for crimes, and they'd walk away. Or they'd say, well, I'll give it some thought. Now, I saw an article, it's a video that got my attention, and it was by the work of a writer who wrote, and I think still writes books, of Christopher John Berknes, I think it's capital B-J-E-R-K-N-E-S. Really good. I think he's telling the truth. And he had Albert Einstein, Karl Marx, and Sigmund Freud exposed. Well, I wanted to see what he said about Einstein. And here it comes also about Sigmund Freud. So I put into Google the truth about Sigmund Freud. And the first thing that came up, or one of the first things that came up, was the truth about Sigmund Freud, part 1. You know, it's www.youtube.com, watch, G equals T-A, capital G7, underline, capitals W-J-D-Z-E-Y is the URL. It is by a Robert Chantler, C-H-A-N-T-L-E-R. His voice sounds like maybe he's an Englishman, and I'm perhaps recognized with my New York speaking voice. I grew up there. I didn't think we had a New York accent. We all spoke the same. But when I taped my science and then would play it back, oh, wow, that's me. I sound like a tough New Yorker. And you know, one of Enrico's top, he came here with Enrico Fermi from Italy. We were discussing advanced constants of theoretical mathematical physics as far as mass and gravitational field. And he heard me, and he closed his eyes, he says, you know, what you say, you know, your capital X prime is capital X minus VT over the square root of 1 minus V squared over capital C squared is equal to or greater than velocity of light, etc. he says, that's great. He says, but you scare me. I said, scare you? He says, you remind me when I first came to this country and I take the New York subway, it'd be late at night and I was afraid that maybe I couldn't get home from those tough New York tugs on the subway. Oh, good golly. But this is my speaking voice, and let's concentrate on the truth of the subject matter. And that this Robert Chantler puts forward part 1 and part 2, in which he says that Freud is a plagiarist. Well, no, he's not just a scientist. He's an expert analytic psychotherapist. And he calls Freud plagiarist and gives from dots the I's and cross the T's about Sigmund Freud. And that sort of verifies my opinion. I'm told that I talk like I know everything about everything in all disciplines. No, I only know what I know. And I think I might have mentioned at the beginning of this video, and that's mainly what I read and analyze and consider to be truthful. And what I had observed was that I didn't know anything about Sigmund Freud, but the popularity this fellow had. Well, it was told that if you kind of cater to your mother, the expression that I knew was you're a mama's boy. And I said, well, I don't think that's correct. He's supposed to be the top psychiatrist and psychologist, writes books on psychology and gives lectures and all that. But I don't think that's correct. Well, years went by and I saw a World War II movie in which this big man, a big husky man, he's in the front line and he was a little too big for the shoes they gave him. So he was told not to take his boots off because you might get killed if you can't move. But he had his shoes off and he's reaching for his boots so he can move, and he gets shot and he's dying. And the only thing he said, and the last thing he said before he died was, Mama. And I thought about it. Now, Freud, are you going to say that this big, strong, brave man who gave his life for this country is a mama's boy? That he's kind of weak then because he's like holding on to the strings of his mother's apron? It's the innuendo, the insinuation Freud put from what they would mention. No. He's saying with his last breath that he is honoring and he's dying, but he honors his mother and he defends his life for his mother. That's my opinion. It comes between my mother and me. I give my life because she can then live and watch the younger children and even have other children and might name one after me. But that is what you must do, in my opinion, to be a real brave man. Not the Sigmund Freud opinion. Then he says, my second question of the Sigmund Freud is that you interpret your dreams. Well, now, I took 1 year of law, and in law, every word is important, and they have what they call adversarial court proceedings. The plaintiff and the defendant, and the plaintiff puts forth what he considers to be his right to be compensated. The defendant says, no, not so, and not proven. And it's better for a jury, or a judge or a jury decides. It's called an adversarial proceeding. Well, when you're say the plaintiff or a witness is on the witness stand, sworn to say the truth, the lawyer says, do you remember like 2 years ago, like December 25th, or, oh, that's Christmas, that's a special date. Well, do you remember September 1st, 2011? It's 2 years ago. You got to think back at 9 p.m. in the evening. You got to think back. There's a lot that happened before, during, and after. And you have to pick out, and the attorney will say to you, was there anything unusual about that day and time? So you have to pick that little unusual item from all of what has occurred. So in my opinion, as far as dreams, what you think about maybe just before you go to sleep, and what was a little item that you had to sort of occurred, that maybe reoccurs in a dream, and that usually is, from what I understand, I haven't studied it, but that usually occurs just before you wake up. And I ought to know, I've had dreams about attractive girls, and I'm kind of being a Casanova, and then I wake up and say, oh golly gee, dream had to continue. Anyway, so my opinion, dreams don't mean anything. Zilch. No meaning at all. It's just a dream. But Freud, a lot of famous in books on interpretation, he says, of dreams. This expert kind of says that Freud is building himself up to be this great psychologist, psychiatrist, and what he says is what the way it is. So I suggest you see that video by Robert Chantler, Chantler, analytic psychotherapist, who kind of psychoanalyzes Freud and presents a video, part 1, part 2, that I think is essentially truthful and worth viewing. To one and all, I say, of course, thank you.